Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about an interesting and intense chapter in history, the Jewish revolts against the Roman Empire. These were times of incredible bravery, tough struggles, and huge tragedies, showing the challenges Jewish people faced under Roman rule. To understand these revolts, let's look at what life was like back then. A historian named Josephus wrote about it in his book Jewish War. He explained how Jewish society was split apart in many ways, both politically and religiously. At first, the area was ruled by local leaders like Herod, but later the Romans took over. Some Roman governors, like Pontius Pilate, treated Jewish customs with disrespect. Heavy taxes and unfair treatment of Jews who didn't follow Greek culture made things even worse. On top of that, the Jewish people were divided into different religious groups that didn't always get along. The first major revolt started during the rule of Emperor Nero in 66 CE. At first, the Jewish people came together and even managed to defeat the Romans in some battles. For a while, the chaos in Rome helped the Jews hold their ground. But things changed when the Roman generals, Vespasian and his son Titus, took charge. They were very organized and determined. By 70 CE, they had destroyed Jerusalem. The temple, a very important place for the Jewish people, was burned down, and only the western wall, the Wailing Wall, was left standing. This day is still remembered as a time of great loss. After being forced out of Jerusalem, many Jews escaped to a fortress called Masada. This was a stronghold on a cliff in the desert. The Romans surrounded the fortress and laid siege to it. After a long wait, the 1,100 Jews inside realized they had no chance of escaping. Instead of being captured, they chose to take their own lives. This ended the first major revolt in a tragic way. After this, life became much harder for the Jewish people. Without the temple, they lost their main place of worship. The Sanhedrin, their ruling council, was disbanded. Pilgrimages to Jerusalem were banned or reduced, and their land was taken by Roman soldiers. Over time, even the written history from this period became quiet, showing just how much had been lost. But the anger against Rome didn't go away. A second revolt began later in places outside Palestine, like Mesopotamia, and spread to Egypt, Cyprus, and Libya. This time, the Romans responded with extreme force. Emperor Trajan sent his toughest generals, Martius Turbo and Lucius Quietus, to crush the revolts. The destruction was terrible. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed. The famous Great Synagogue of Alexandria was destroyed, and in some places, like Cyprus, the Jewish population was completely wiped out. Lucius Quietus became governor of Judea after this, and his name was feared for his cruelty. When Emperor Hadrian took over, he seemed like he might take a softer approach. He removed Quietus, executed him, and even worked with Jewish leaders. For a short time, it seemed like things might improve. The Romans even talked about rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple. But this didn't last. Hadrian's plans to move the temple to a new location upset the Jewish people. Then, after the murder of Hadrian's daughter, things got worse. His Jewish advisors were blamed, and Hadrian took harsh actions. He banned Jews from returning to their homeland, outlawed their religious practices, and decided to build a pagan temple on the site of the destroyed temple. And this story brings us to one of the bravest yet most tragic figures of the Jewish revolts, a leader named Bar Kokhba. His real name was Shimon Bar Kokhba, but many called him Bar Kokhba, which means son of the star. For the Jewish people, this name was full of hope, and at first, it seemed like he might truly lead them to freedom. Bar Kokhba's journey began with some incredible victories. He managed to defeat the powerful Roman 10th Legion in Jerusalem, and drove the Romans out of many important areas in Judea. His leadership inspired a massive following, with about 400,000 Jewish fighters joining his cause. Together they pushed back Roman reinforcements sent from Syria, Egypt, and Arabia. In just 1 year, Bar Kokhba's forces took back 985 villages and built 50 strong fortresses. But Bar Kokhba wasn't just a warrior, he was also a strong leader. He set up a government, divided land fairly, and even took Roman coins, stamping them with phrases like, "Freedom of Jerusalem" and "Freedom of Israel." His efforts united many who had been divided, giving them a shared sense of purpose and hope during a time of great oppression. Bar Kokhba's growing power caught the attention of Emperor Hadrian, who realized he had to act quickly. Hadrian brought in one of his best generals, Sextus Julius Severus, all the way from Britain to deal with the rebellion. Severus faced a tough challenge. Bar Kokhba and his forces knew how to use guerrilla warfare, striking and retreating into caves and rugged terrain. These tactics made it difficult for the Romans to engage them in traditional battles. The rebels used the natural landscape to their advantage, making it nearly impossible for the Romans to easily advance. To win, the Romans had to be patient and strategic. Severus' plan involved laying sieges, cutting off food supplies, and spreading false information to weaken the rebels. These methods were slow but effective, as they chipped away at the strength and morale of Bar Kokhba's forces. The last and most devastating battle took place in 135 CE, at Beth Ter, a heavily fortified town southwest of Jerusalem. The Jewish fighters defended the town fiercely and held out for a long time. The walls of Beth Ter were strong, and the defenders had prepared for a lengthy siege. Despite the odds, they refused to surrender, knowing what awaited them if they did. However, as the siege dragged on, supplies ran low, and the people inside the town began to lose hope. Eventually, Bar Kokhba's support collapsed. Some of the townspeople, possibly out of fear or desperation, turned on him, and he was killed. His death marked the end of the rebellion and shattered the hopes of many who had believed in his cause. After the siege, Hadrian followed through on his harsh promises. He destroyed Jerusalem completely and built a Roman temple on the Temple Mount. This was not just a physical destruction but a symbolic one, meant to erase the connection between the Jewish people and their sacred city. He also declared that no Jewish person could ever enter the city again, or even look at it from afar. This decree was deeply painful for the Jewish people, as Jerusalem had been the heart of their spiritual and cultural identity. The defeat left a lasting wound in the relationship between the Jewish people and the Roman Empire, one that would not heal for centuries. During Bar Kokhba's early successes, many believed he was the Messiah. Even respected rabbis like Rabbi Akiba supported him, giving him the name Bar Kokhba, because they saw him as a savior. This belief brought hope to many who had suffered under Roman rule, and it gave them a reason to fight. However, not everyone agreed. One rabbi reportedly told Akiba, "Grass will grow on your chin before the Messiah comes," showing his doubt about Bar Kokhba's role. As the tide of the rebellion turned, this doubt spread among the people. Sadly, Rabbi Akiba was one of the estimated 500,000 Jews who lost their lives in the revolt. Thousands more, including many rabbis, were sold into slavery. Families were torn apart, and communities that had once thrived were left in ruins. Over time, Jewish texts stopped using the name Bar Kokhba, and instead called him Bar Koziba, which means son of the lie. This reflected the deep sense of loss and disappointment after his defeat. The name change was a way of expressing the bitterness and disillusionment that followed. However, Christian sources continued to use the name Bar Kokhba, preserving the memory of his rise and fall as an important part of history. For some, his story became a symbol of courage and resistance, while for others, it was a cautionary tale of failed hopes and the heavy price of rebellion. The legacy of Bar Kokhba is complex. On one hand, he represented the strength and determination of a people who refused to give up their identity and faith, even in the face of overwhelming odds. On the other hand, his defeat marked a turning point, leading to even greater suffering and loss. Despite this, his story remains a powerful reminder of the resilience and spirit of those who fought for their freedom. Bar Kokhba's name may have faded in some records, but his impact on history and the memory of those who believed in him continue to resonate to this day.